Everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Today, I get to interview Teresa. So, of course, Teresa and I are co-hosts to this amazing podcast. But I love doing these little Q&As with Teresa. And today's topic is menstrual cramps. So we get a lot of questions about this, Teresa, don't we?
Yes.
A lot. So today's focus is going to be again on what menstrual cramps are, like what causes menstrual cramps, but then what can we do about them? It seems like that is often a common reason women are put on the pill is because of the pain they experience during their period. So good news to all of our listeners. Teresa is going to enlighten us to some remedies and some tools to help us kind of get through this time a bit more as women. So Teresa, let's get started. Let's get started.
Because I just had one of my a sister-in-law, wonderful lady, reach out to me, and she was like, Teresa, what episode do you have that I can send someone who's dealing with menstrual cramps? And I was like, oh, I'm like, I know we've probably talked about it, but we don't have an episode on cramps. But I'm like, that's a great idea, because this is just one of those things. I think it's ubiquitous in the sense that we all kind of have at least some experience with it, but there's such a variety of different experiences around it too. And so we need to have a lot of tools and a lot of tips for women experiencing all types of menstrual cramps. And so this is going to be very helpful for women all across the lifespan.
Amen, girl. Okay, so let's get started with sharing with our listeners, Teresa, what causes menstrual cramps?
Yeah, so let's first talk about like what the actual medical word for menstrual cramps is, and that's dysmenorrhea. So if you just want to know the fancy word for it, it's dysmenorrhea. And there's two types of dysmenorrhea. We call them either primary or secondary. And that just means like either cramps in the primary sense are just a part of the phenomenon of our period, or you can have cramps that are what are called secondary. And that means that there's some underlying kind of issue or pathology causing those cramps. So I want to focus on primary dysmenorrhea in this episode, because what we're talking about is just the run-of-the-mill cramps that all of us can experience and how we can deal with them. So primary cramps are just that. They're due to what happens in the natural menstrual cycle. And we've talked about the natural menstrual cycle quite a bit, Jamie. Mm-hmm. But of course, we know it's a roller coaster of hormonal events that occur. And the whole purpose around this roller coaster is that the body every cycle is preparing for a new little baby to be implanted there. Now, we know that that doesn't happen very often for each individual woman, but that's essentially what's happening every month, is that she's preparing for this new life. And in that process, the lining of our womb or our uterus is building up. It's creating this environment that's very receptive to that little baby. But when the baby doesn't come and it's not implanted there, then the body basically says, hormonally, we have to now restart this process over. And when that happens, it's kind of crazy. It's like the only place in the human body where there's almost an injury and a repair in a very short amount of time. And it's caused by the human body itself. Instead of like you fall down and you scrape your knee and your body says, oh, we've got to repair your knee, so we're going to send all of your immune system chemicals and make a scab and you're going to heal that. The body actually is almost causing, in a sense, injury to itself and then repairing it really quickly. And the reason why I say that is because it has to create all these like immune system inflammatory chemicals that come to the site of the uterus to start breaking down that lining so that you can shed it in that process that we call menstruation. So I find that whole thing fascinating, and it's so like incredibly complex in so many ways. And again, unique to the female design.
Amen. Oh my gosh, Teresa, I never thought of it like that ever in my whole entire life. That's awesome. Okay. So we now know, it's called dysmenorrhea. So whenever we see articles or anything, you all are wondering, that means painful period, painful menses. Now let's talk a little bit, Teresa, in terms of what causes cramping within the uterus? Why do we experience that pain?
Yeah, so it goes back to those inflammatory chemicals. And specifically, we call them prostaglandins. And those prostaglandins, basically, again, they're kind of creating inflammation in the lining. They're also kind of starting to break down something. And it's more than just that, but these inflammatory chemicals create inflammation, basically, which also I say cause almost like a mini labor. I mean, these are like small, very rhythmic type of contractions that occur to allow that lining of the uterus to release.
Mhm.
So, in some ways, we're all going through a little tiny labor every time we have a menstruation. And these inflammatory chemicals for some women are sensitive. They cause pain, they cause a cramping. And so, when we think about that, this is why one of the primary ways to deal with cramps is to look at it as inflammation and to treat it with some sort of anti inflammation. And that could be pharmaceutical, it could be a natural thing, it could be even heat or applying even cool. So, what we're doing is we're tackling basically inflammation that's causing the cramps. And so, I like to say some women may be more sensitive to those prostaglandins because, like, why does some girl get cramps so bad that she really needs to take a lot of medicine or she has to miss practice at school? And why does another girl next to her like kind of seem to breeze through it? So there's this variety of experience around it.
Mhm.
And that may be because some women produce more prostaglandins, more inflammatory chemicals, or their bodies are just quite sensitive to those chemicals, and their experience of expressing them is just more dramatic, you could say.
And at the very beginning, you were saying how there's like two different types of dysmenorrhea. One that's like less severe, and then the second that is more severe. Just so that women wondering as they're listening to this, if your cramps are really severe, what would you recommend they do? And not that we're going to go on a tangent in this regard, but just so that anybody wondering can kind of know their next step if it's X, Y, or Z a thing. So what should they be looking for that's just beyond the normal kind of pain?
Right. Yeah. So, and I say this to all of my patients when we're talking about cramps. If for some reason you come into me and you have cramps, and we've done all of the things that we can do to help mitigate those cramps and to make them better, and you're still having so much pain, then what we say is that the likelihood is that there's a secondary cause to that, a secondary reason for your dysmenorrhea. And that just means we need to go hunting for what that cause is. Now, from previous episodes, we've talked about endometriosis, and endometriosis is one of the biggest reasons why someone might have very severe type of cramping. But you need a really good doctor to help you kind of navigate that and to look for that underlying root cause. But there could be other, causes of dysmenorrhea. You could actually have a hormonal imbalance. You could have a thyroid issue. You could have dominance in one hormone over another that causes more cramps. You could also have ovarian cysts or some sort of other kind of abnormal pathology of the uterus. So at that point, you need to see a physician and to look for those underlying causes and have a really good detective, I say, a doctor that is willing to look for them rather than just put you immediately on birth control. You want to ask the question, well, why am I having so much pain? No one should really have that much pain. And it's something women deserve an answer for.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Teresa. I was just thinking as people were listening, they would want to kind of make sure they're knowing what path to take. Okay. So now that we know again what causes the pain, what can women do to help themselves through this? What do you recommend?
Yeah. And at some point, I know Jamie and we talked about going to this conference this year, but with all these college students, young people, it sounds like it's going to be more virtual. But I love this opportunity to talk about, period kind of problems and what we can do to help them. Because so often women aren't given like the simple things to do. It's kind of like, oh, you have cramps. Why don't you just take birth control? And then like, well, wait, there was all of these steps you could have told someone, and they may have not needed to go on such a strong medication to avert their cramps. So the first and foremost thing is that when, a woman has cramps, and again, we're dealing with these inflammatory chemicals, Medications that decrease those inflammatory chemicals are very helpful, like ibuprofen, like Aleve. We know naproxen is the generic name of Aleve. But ibuprofen is the easiest one. It's readily, easily available to all people. Most people take it without any problems. There are a limited amount of people who can't take ibuprofen, but that's pretty rare. But what I find is that women don't know how to take ibuprofen the right way in order to really help their cramps. So this is the common story. Girl, gets her period. She starts having cramps. She thinks, oh, this is going to be bad. And she lets those cramps get really bad to the point where, now she's like, should I go home from school? Oh my gosh, this is miserable. I may not make it to class today. And then it's harder to get on top of that pain.
Mm-hmm.
But if we help her to understand, again, the cause of her cramps means that you have these chemicals you can suppress. If you take ibuprofen and you take it at higher dosages than just what's over the counter, we like to call that like a therapeutic dose, or more like a prescription dose.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be over the counter ibuprofen would be like 600 or 800 milligrams or 3 or 4 of the over the counter tablets. And you get on top of that before your pain gets really bad. So you take that ibuprofen and then, you don't wait until the pain is severe. And then you take it at appropriate times apart. So if it's 600 milligrams, you don't take it again for at least 6 hours.
Mm.
If it's 800 milligrams, you don't take it again for at least, 8 hours.
Mm.
And if you did this and you took this, again, got on top of it right away before your cramps are bad, the vast majority of women will control their cramps easily. So that would be the over-the-counter kind of pharmaceutical way to deal with it, but still dealing with the root cause, because the root cause is inflammatory chemicals. And again, always talk to your doctor about whether, a treatment like that is right for you. But again, most women have never been told how to take anti-inflammatories properly. And when they are told that, it makes a world of difference in the outcome.
Awesome. Well, very good, Teresa. So let's think about some of the more natural ways to address that pain during the period.
Yes. And I know you'll have some ideas for this too, Jamie. So I'll start with mine and then please add into them.
Yeah.
But I love the natural ways. And again, I think ibuprofen is magic. So I definitely know that there's a place for real medicine, but natural medicine is awesome. So if someone's just like, well, I would rather stay away from taking ibuprofen because I just don't like to take medicines. That is a common thing that I hear. Okay. Let's think about what natural anti-inflammatories we have in our toolbox to help your cramps. And the go-tos that I would have would be fish oil. So fish oil or flaxseed oil. So your omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. And fish oil is pretty easy. Again, I like it because it's over the counter. And I always say Jesus ate fish, so why don't we eat fish too? So
Amen.
Fish is always good. So, fish oil, easy to get. Trader Joe's has a brand. There's good brands out there at fish oil. And that's key. With fish oil, I do think you need kind of a quality brand. Nordic Naturals is another brand that's really good. But there's quality other ones. Fish oil, take 2 to 3 capsules at bedtime. Now, I don't say take it just during the period. I say take it every day because I kind of think that it's better with supplements to be on top of your inflammation overall. Mm-hmm. So taking 2 capsules of fish oil at bedtime is great. Magnesium is my second one. Magnesium is great. It's anti-inflammatory, but it's also a muscle relaxant. What is the uterus? It is a muscle, a very small, but very incredibly capable muscle. And so magnesium is this great muscle relaxant. And I love the form of magnesium called magnesium glycinate. And magnesium glycinate is a gentler form of magnesium on the gut. We know that magnesium is actually used as a laxative. So if you take magnesium citrate, you take magnesium oxide, you might have a laxative effect if you took quite a bit. And with magnesium glycinate, you get the whole beautiful benefits of magnesium without that problem usually, because it's gentler on the gut. So you can take 400 to 800 milligrams of magnesium glycinate every night at bedtime. And that also is beautiful for helping cramps. Thirdly, I love turmeric. Turmeric is a very, very, very powerful anti-inflammatory. And I would say not everybody tolerates turmeric. It's considered like a hot herb, like a hot spice, but it is beautiful, it is powerful, and is very, very good for so many things. I actually use it for joint aches and pains as well. But it can also help cramps too. So someone could take, a couple capsules of turmeric a day, and that's also a beautiful anti-inflammatory to help with cramps. And then studied and researched, the last one I'll bring up is pine bark or cramp bark, and also known as pycnogenol. And this has been studied in randomized controlled trials at a dose of about 60 milligrams to help reduce dysmenorrhea or cramps. And so that's another one that could be used as an herbal to help reduce cramps as well. So those are just a few of my go-tos.
Awesome. I have a friend that reached out to me a few months ago, and she started taking pine bark. And yeah, she said she did 30 milligrams 2 times a day to decrease her severe pain. But then what she also did was she used something called the Lifelong Vitality Pack. It has like the omega-3 fatty acids, the multivitamins. And then also she used, and you could probably pronounce this better than me, NAC, it's N-acetylcysteine. Do you know what that is?
Yes, NAC. N-acetylcysteine.
Yes, okay.
Awesome. It's a antioxidant, pre-glutathione. It's really, really good for a lot of things. So that's a good one. It's actually good for making cervical mucus.
Oh, very good.
Yep. So we'll sometimes use that. We call it natural Mucinex.
Natural Mucinex. Okay, cool.
Properties that help liquefy mucus. So NAC is a really good supplement.
Yeah. So she took 600 milligrams 3 times a day for 3 consecutive days for 3 months. So anyway, for those of you guys listening, we're going to create a little toolkit for this menstrual cramp. And then just as a little teaser, kind of taking a little side path here, but we're going to be offering little e-courses in the future. And so be looking for that. More details to come on that front, but likely many of you guys are trying to keep track of all that we say and share, and we want to make it easier for you. So again, as we're recommending these protocols and things to try, we want to make it something simple so that you can, actually experience those benefits. Okay. So I have just a few things to add. I found a study actually this morning from obstetrics and gynecological research. This was from 2012. But there is a randomized double-blind clinical trial. There were 48 women, I believe. Half of them were in a group where they applied like a synthetic fragrance over their abdomen. They didn't know it was a synthetic fragrance. And then the other half rubbed essential oils in a lotion, unscented lotion, over their abdomen. And then they did this, every day for a month. So they didn't just do it during their period, every single day for a month. They used, in the group where they used the essential oils, they put clary sage, lavender, and marjoram. And again, I can include this stuff in our toolkit, but just if you have those 3 and then put it in an unscented lotion at 3% concentration. So just, you don't need a ton, but it really did decrease the number of days that they experienced pain and the severity of the pain. And again, they just rub the lower abdomen. So those are essential oils that are super helpful for, again, it's like the muscle relaxer. And that was one thing I found that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to share. Also, if you have Epsom salts, and again, essential oils, taking baths to relax, again, the uterus and just your pelvic muscles and all of that, using, again, lavender, clary sage, vetiver. Something I recommend people do is, rather than just putting a couple drops in their bathtub, make sure that you create like maybe a cup of Epsom salt and create like a little Epsom salt concoction. So a couple drops of lavender, a drop of clary sage, a drop of even vetiver if you have any, and then let it sit for a while so it's absorbed into the Epsom salt, because essential oils and water don't mix, but if it's absorbed into the Epsom salt will then dissolve into the tub. So that's another natural way to decrease that pain. And then one more I want to share, and then we can kind of keep chatting, is exercise. And Teresa, maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. But exercise is also meant to help. There was, again, a study I found how medium intensity for 30 minutes, 3 days a week really did decrease the pain that women experience. And I guess I don't know the physiology behind that. And Teresa, I don't know if you know that at all.
Yeah. Well, I think they would believe that it is due to endorphins. So when you exercise, you make chemicals to fight inflammation, basically, because your body, when you exercise, there is a certain amount of natural inflammation that's occurring. So you're creating these chemicals. Sometimes we refer to them as endorphins or natural opiates, and you can experience, that when you get a runner's high, right? When people exercise and they just feel good and they love to keep doing it because it feels good to them. Those same chemicals are basically pain relievers. So they actually produce a natural amount of pain relief through, producing those chemicals when you exercise. So that science is real. It's been used in lots of other types of kind of pain experiences. So exercise is awesome. I mean, going back to like I just love this story because I had a girl come to me in her 20s and she had terrible, terrible cramps. And I said, okay, well, we're going to do like some, medical therapy first. But I said, your cramps are so bad. I was thinking she might have endometriosis.
Yeah.
And her mom, I think it ran in her family. Anyway, I put her on a bunch of, supplements, kind of my routine ones. And she came back to me in 2 months. And when we started talking, she started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is bad. None of this worked. I'm like, well, we really got to get you into a doctor. And she's like, no. She's like, my cramps are gone.
Oh.
And she's like, I don't understand why. She's like, they were so bad. And I said, well, I mean, sometimes our body is just missing so many different nutrients and things that it needs that you couldn't handle the inflammation that you were experiencing. So in some cases, just doing the simple things can make dramatic differences. And that's a beautiful thing to see. Now, in some cases, it doesn't work. And I would have been telling that person, yes, you do need to now go see a physician, but why not start with the simple things, the healthy things?
Yeah.
And along those lines, we know that, you can use your diet to also target inflammation. So, a lot of, my patients ask, what can I do from a dietary perspective? And taking processed foods out of the diet, taking sugar out of your diet, definitely can make a difference. We also know dairy. Dairy can have, a type of endocrine system disruption in it from the chemicals in some milk and dairy products. So taking those out of the diet can make a huge difference too. I don't know if your experience has been that, Jamie, in talking to people.
Yeah. Just meat and dairy and just all of the estrogens that are found in meat and dairy. It's just, that's a whole other conversation that Teresa and I will actually be talking more about, but it's incredible how in life, we're so observant on what we're eating, which is good. It's good that we're aware of what we're putting into our body, but yet on the other hand, we're pumping our body full of synthetic hormones. It's like we don't realize that there's that disconnect. And again, we'll talk more about that too in another episode. One thing I wanted to share too is like a heat wrap or a heat patch. I didn't realize there was that. I mean, I always just assume, okay, if you have cramps, put heat pack on your body as you're taking a nap or falling asleep or whatever, just to help yourself. But I didn't realize that there were actually heat patches you can find on Amazon or anything else that you just apply to your lower abdomen throughout the day to ease that pain. I didn't know that.
No, I mean, that's somewhat been newer. I think that you can apply them, but they can last up to hours. And yeah, I mean, if someone had to go to class and they were just struggling and didn't, have access to other things or medicines, I mean, we know it works. Why? Because every young person has done it and said I've had people with such severe cramps tell me I can take all the ibuprofen in the world. The only thing that helps me is heat.
Yeah.
So, warming that area up, it creates more inflammation in a sense, but there is bringing blood flow to that area. That's also bringing other immune system, just help, you could say, and help calming kind of down what's going on. Or it's just, you feel so much heat, your brain is diverted to not feel the pain too. There's always that idea that one sensation can override another sensation.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I think that probably has something to do with it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, one more question, Teresa. I know that this is about menstrual cramps, this episode, but I am going to ask you a question about heavy flow. And again, that can maybe even be its own episode, but just for now, for people who have a really heavy flow, what do you recommend they do? Let's say it's not endometriosis or any other thing, just super duper heavy.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, I mean, this again, what works probably medicinally the best is ibuprofen or a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and ibuprofen is the easiest. So especially when you take a higher dose, the 800 milligrams every 8, and they've done studies on this to show if you start before your flow is at that super heavy point, so you get started when it's kind of working up to that medium or lighter flow starting into the medium. If you get started on that 800 and stay on it every 8 hours, not missing doses, you will reduce your flow by 30%.
Mm-hmm.
So for most people that I have done this with, they're like, where was this my whole life? You know? And cramps don't always have to go with heavy periods. They can, but when it's heavy, I do think there is possibly a more of an indication that there is either a hormonal imbalance or some sort of underlying issue. So that's something I think that a little tips it towards getting to a doctor and seeing what's going on is if you have such heavy flow that you're leaking through at night, or you're not able to, you have to change your pad every 1 to 2 hours, those types of things. I think, at least getting evaluated is a good idea. But I would say that 800 every 8 around the clock, and most people only need it for a day.
Mm-hmm.
One day is usually just the worst, and that just makes that day just go a lot smoother.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so if you, as our listeners, if you're experiencing heavy flow or again, the painful periods, and again, the typical response, if we go to the doctor, is birth control. But we're here to tell you that there are natural ways and often easy ways to decrease that pain. We just gave you several. And then also, again, for those of you with heavy flow, if you do go to your doctor and they do say, birth control, I insist and I urge you to find a second opinion. And you've learned just by listening to us in our podcast that birth control is not going to fix your heavy flow. It's a Band-Aid. So when you remove the birth control or synthetic hormones from your cycle or from your life, that problem will still exist. It's not fixing anything. And if you're experiencing that heavy flow, just like Teresa said, it could be an indication of something a bit more serious, and you really should get to the root of that cause and work at that root issue instead of putting a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, Jamie. Yeah, there definitely is other things, adding, correcting those hormonal imbalances, adding progesterone sometimes can be really great for heavy flow too. So do not feel like your only answer is synthetic hormones. And just reach out to us if you have any questions about cramps and stories about cramps. We'd love to hear from you. But this is just a little bit of a dive into what you can do to make your cramps better. And we hope it's been helpful for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. Your wisdom will benefit many.